International Freedom of Expression Institute, Article 19, issued a declaration today, 13th June 2024, on freedom of expression in the Gambia at the Gambia Press Union office at Fajara.
So this press declaration is read in the Gambia, Banjul, the Gambia, on the 13th day of June 2024. For context, currently in the Gambia for engagement and advocacy purposes, Article 19 has met with state actors, decision makers, civil society organizations, and media representatives to express concerns over the draft cybercrime bill and to gather support from these stakeholders. The visit aimed to foster dialogue and ensure that the proposed cybercrime legislation aligns with international human rights standards and protects the freedoms essential to a democratic society. During this visit, Article 19 emphasized the importance of drafting laws that do not infringe on freedom of expression and that any measure taken to combat cybercrime should be balanced with the protection of individual human rights and freedoms. This collaborative effort seeks to support the development of a legal framework that effectively addresses cyber threats while upholding the democratic values of freedom of expression, access to information, transparency, accountability, and respect for human rights. We also emphasize on the need of upholding security of journalists, protecting civil space by refraining from criminalizing opinions in the press and online, and intimidating critical media in the country, as well as accelerating legal reforms guaranteeing press freedom. Article 19 Senegal and West Africa has been working with partners in the Gambia to promote and defend human rights, freedom of expression, and access to information over the last 15 years. In this context, we have conducted a series of engagements with stakeholders in the past and currently to review different laws in the past, including the Constitution. First, we would like to express our gratitude to the state authorities and the various institutions that have received us while here, and also our participating civil society organizations and the media, especially the Gambia Press Union. The Gambia Press Union Article 19 expressed concerns over the recent proposed cybercrime bill of the Republic of the Gambia, which contains some problematic issues that, if adopted in its current state, would threaten legitimate forms of expression and online dissent. Furthermore, we express our worries on the situation of journalists, human rights defenders, and activists in the country. In some instances, we have seen the authorities cracking down journalists and human rights defenders on the basis of their critiques and comments over the management of public affairs in general. Therefore, we call the revision of restrictive provisions against freedom of expression and the media in the cybercrime bill, acceleration of legal reforms and standards of civil space generally in the Gambia. As a reminder, the Gambia went through a very dark period of its history, characterized by the ruling with the iron fist by the Jammeh's regime. Several human rights violations took place in the country, including imprisonment and killing of journalists, forced exile and disappearances, torture and ill treatment. When Adama Barrow came to power in 2017, a wind of hope opened for the Gambia, who are now hoping a democratic ruling and human rights respecting approach will be adopted. The government of Barrow has been undergoing significant reforms, focusing on restoring the rule of law, deepening democracy, advancing transitional justice, and transforming the security sector. One notable initiative was the establishment of the Truth, Reconciliation and Reparations Commission in 2018 to investigate human rights violations committed during the Jammeh regime. After 2 years of diligent work, the TRRC issued a white paper with key recommendations, including repealing archaic prison laws and replacing them with modern, progressive legislation suitable for a democratic society, urgently calling on reforming of the media laws and replacing the existing constitution. In December 2018, and in response to the recommendations, formed the Constitutional Reform President Barrow established a constitutional reform commission to conduct nationwide consultation, culminating in a constitutional referendum scheduled for 2019, and these proposed amendments were rejected by the National Assembly in 2020. While we have observed a positive track since 2017, we note with particular concern a discernible pattern of authorities curtailing free speech, stifling political dissent, and narrowing the civic space within the country. Based on 5 instances of arrest of journalists, political figures, and human rights defenders merely for expressing opinions online or through traditional media. For instance, the recent persecutions of journalist Alhagi Bora and human rights defender Mahdi Jabote, in addition to comments by President Adama Barrow expressing hostility towards media freedom. Other arrests we have monitored closely also include Bakary Makajeng, the proprietor of the Makajan Daily Media Outlets, was apprehended by Gambia law enforcement on 20 September 2023 in relation to his coverage of fatalities involving the police. Makajeng was subsequently granted bail and formally accused of interference with a witness in September 2023. Still in September of the same year, opposition activists Modu Sabali and Bayo Sonko were taken into custody, even though they have since been released on bail. The comedian Alhagi Bora Sisawa was initially arrested on 13 August 2023 after he criticized President Barrow. He was also granted bail by the Gambian police forces, but the bail was revoked still in August of the same year. Against this backdrop, the draft bill's numerous provisions punishing various forms of speech and criticism of officials online is alarming. We believe that it is vital that the Gambia's efforts to address cybercrime are consistent with its obligations to protect and promote freedom of expression under international law, and that countering cybercrime is not used as an excuse to repress dissent. At the international level, discussions are ongoing, including within the United Nations, about an international convention on cybercrime. We recall that the Gambia is an active and participating member in this discussion. It therefore raises questions about the necessity of drafting its own bill at such a juncture. Moreover, we also note that and have also consistently cautioned against the potential for abuse inherent in such a convention by the state without necessarily waiting for international guidelines, highlighting its tendency to perpetuate existing rights violations seen in cybercrime laws worldwide. The current version of the bill, the Cybercrime Bill of the Gambia, falls short of even the minimal standards outlined in the UN Draft Declaration and the AU Principles on Access to Information and Freedom of Expression, as well as the AU Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection and the AU Draft Continental AI Strategy. As a group, we further acknowledge aspirations 2, 3, and 4 of the African Union Agenda 2063, which envision an African integration, good governance, democracy, human rights, justice, the rule of law, and peaceful and secure Africa. During this engagement with stakeholders, we highlighted several key issues that render the bill problematic for freedom of expression and freedom of the media. And the issues are as follows. For instance, the bill would make an alarming scope of online speech a crime under the guise of combating cybercrime. The majority of proposed offenses have nothing to do with cybercrime apart from having the word cyber or computer attached to it. The bill would make organizations, civil society, and their senior leadership individually criminally liable for stories and investigations. Under the bill, senior leadership of corporate entities would be individually criminally liable for the actions of entities, and they would have the burden to prove that they actively conducted due diligence of published content So all of you here would be liable one way or the other for whatever content that you publish online. And the publication of evidence or data in the public interest could be criminalized. The computer crime offenses are so broadly worded that they make any unauthorized act in relation to a computer or data a crime. The fourth issue, the bill would create significant police and surveillance powers that in some cases are subject to no judicial or similar independent oversight. And finally, the bill would criminalize digital security and legitimate academic or legitimate academic or security research. Other police powers include the ability to force service providers to compel the decryption of content, as well as hold the mere possession of digital security tools without intent to commit any crime, a criminal offense in itself. We therefore have the following recommendations. The inclusion of a reference. We recommend that the bill includes the reference to the Gambia's obligations under international human rights law to protect and promote freedom of expression, as well as an affirmation that no provision of the bill will be used to stifle the activities of journalists, human rights defenders, or dissidents. We also recommend a striking off of Article 16(2)(4), which allows compelled decryption and undermines a necessary tool for the realization of the right to freedom of expression by journalists, human rights defenders, and the public at large. Provisions for a mandatory independent review of any preservation or production orders issued by law enforcement, and the elimination of the automatic gag order for recipients, and provisions for the opportunity to judicially challenge the validity of such an order. We further recommend the inclusion of clear requirements of serious harm before criminal liability and the definition of key terms, such as what it means to expeditiously or sufficiently comply with orders in order to provide legal certainty. We also recommend a striking off of articles dealing with offenses that are not cyber-dependent offenses and absolutely have no place in cybercrime legislation and uniformly constitute restrictions on freedom of expression by criminalizing valid criticism of public officials. We also recommend the striking off of articles that explicitly eliminate the requirements for specific intent to impact computer systems or data. Instead, the bill must make it clear that every cyber-dependent offense requires specific dishonest intent. On the issues of arrest and persecution of journalists and human rights defenders and the necessity to safeguard civic space, we strongly recommend the Gambian authorities to uphold the fundamental rights to freedom of expression and press guaranteed by international human rights standards, including the Universal Declaration of Human Rights and the International Convention on Civil and Political Rights, as well as the African Charter and its associated protocols and declarations. Seize all forms of harassment, intimidation, and violence against journalists and human rights defenders, and ensure their safety and protection from any reprisals for their work. Review and amend any laws or regulations that restrict freedom of expression or enable arbitrary arrest and prosecution of journalists and human rights defenders, and ensure that all laws comply with international human rights standards. Conduct prompt, thorough, and transparent investigations into any allegations of violence, harassment, or intimidation against journalists and human rights defenders, and hold perpetrators accountable through fair legal processes. Guarantee due process rights for all individuals, including journalists and human rights defenders, who are subjected to arrest or persecution. This includes the right to legal representation, a fair trial, and protection from arbitrary detention. Furthermore, we acknowledge the work of civil society organizations in the country and further encourage them to continue with efforts in holding the government accountable for the protection and promotion of human rights, for an inclusive, safe, and democratic society where the rule of law is upheld and democratic processes are realities for all. The GPU and Article 19 will continue working with other stakeholders to uphold freedom of expression, accountability, transparency, and ensure access to information and promotion of human rights for all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.